¿Se oye? ¿Sí? Vale. Aquí está bien, ¿no? A esta altura.
Pues cuando queráis.
Pues cuando tú nos digas. Vale. Bueno, buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. Primero voy a decir unas palabras en inglés para la gente que nos está siguiendo en YouTube y después voy a pasar a hacer una presentación de Grazia en español. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Grazia Sciacchitano, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Florence, who is the speaker for this season of the series of conferences on Europe and human rights from a historical perspective, organized by the Jean Monnet-HISTEU. She's going to talk about the support of the Spanish socialists for Chilean democratization in the 1980s. Her presentation will be in English, but now I'm going to introduce her in Spanish for the audience here at the Complutense University of Madrid. Pues bienvenidos a la primera sesión de este ciclo de otoño del taller sobre Europa y los derechos humanos en perspectiva histórica, organizado por la Cátedra Jean Monnet-HISTEU. Hoy tenemos el gusto y el honor de contar con la investigadora de la Universidad de Florencia, Grazia Sciacchitano, quien va a hablar sobre cómo España apoyó la democratización de Chile en los años 80 con una ayuda de carácter político que fue moldeada por su propia transición. Antes de presentar formalmente a nuestra ponente de hoy, quiero agradecer el apoyo del Departamento de Historia Moderna e Historia Contemporánea a esta actividad y el apoyo del proyecto del Plan Nacional de Investigación España y Europa, la presencia e influencia de España en las instituciones europeas. También quiero recordar que este taller forma parte de un ciclo de formación en estudios europeos e historia internacional de la Cátedra Jean Monnet-HISTEU, Historia de Europa y de la integración europea. Este ciclo comenzó en primavera, cuando tuvimos 4 sesiones, y ahora retomamos las conferencias con un ciclo de otoño que constará de 3 sesiones más. Cada sesión estará compuesta por una presentación que se puede seguir online en el canal de YouTube de la cátedra y por actividades prácticas para los presentes en la sala. Por lo tanto, para los que no estuvisteis en las sesiones anteriores, quiero aclarar que la sesión de hoy consistirá en una conferencia a la cual le seguirá luego una actividad más participativa. Al final de la primera parte dejaremos unos 10-15 minutos para un turno de preguntas antes de pasar a la parte práctica. Y para la gente que nos está siguiendo en línea, si tenéis alguna pregunta, pues podéis escribirla en el chat de YouTube y nosotros la leeremos desde aquí al final de la presentación. So, for those of you who are following online, at the end of Grazia's presentation, you will be able to, or you can write questions if you have them in the YouTube channel, and then we will read them from here. Sin más dilación, ahora sí paso a presentar a nuestra ponente, Grazia Sciacchitano, quien obtuvo su doctorado en Historia en el Instituto Universitario Europeo de Florencia en 2018, con una tesis en la que investigó comparativamente los cambios que experimentó el campo en el sur de Italia y de España durante las décadas de 1950 y 1960. Entre 2018 y 2021 fue investigadora postdoctoral en la Universidad de St. Andrews, en Escocia, trabajando en un proyecto financiado por el European Research Council, La dictadura como experiencia. En septiembre y octubre de 2019 también fue investigadora invitada en Fate of Nations del Norwegian University of Sciences and Technology de Trondheim, para explorar el desarrollo de la regulación minera en el sur de Europa. Y ahora, de nuevo, es guest researcher en esta misma universidad. Pero actualmente su actividad principal es la de ser investigadora postdoctoral en la Universidad de Florencia, dentro del proyecto financiado también por el European Research Council, llamado Humanitarianism and Mediterranean Europe, a Transnational and Comparative History, from 1945 to 1990. Su investigación adopta un enfoque comparativo para el estudio de la ayuda internacional española. También está interesada en la metodología de la historia comparada y las nuevas perspectivas y paradigmas sobre la Europa mediterránea, que permiten superar dicotomías como modernidad y atraso o estados-nación centrales y periféricos de Europa. Grazia, además, es una buena amiga desde nuestros años como doctorandos en el UI, por lo que, además de la dimensión académica, es un placer y un gusto tenerlo aquí. Así que, ya sin añadir nada más, te agradezco tu presencia, Grazia, y te dejo la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias, Alan. This is the best introduction I have ever had, I think. Fantastic, thank you. So it's a great pleasure to be here. So thanks again to everyone for the invitation. Today I will present my last piece of research within the Human Euromed project that Alain mentioned. It's so about the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party aid to Chile to support its transition to democracy during the 80s. As I said, this is my last piece of research. It's an article that should be published next year in a special issue, together with a contribution from Alain here, Granadino, and Giulia Quaggio. So before delving into the core of the subject, the international aid, I would like to introduce the general context. I will first talk about the impact of the coup d'état of 1973, the Pinochet coup, on the Spanish society and politics. Then I will move to talk about the links and the impact on Spanish foreign policies in the 1980s. And then we will move to the core, which is the aid for democracy and the Spanish Socialist Party support, and how this helped establish the country as emerging international aid donor. And in doing this, I will also reflect on Spanish own democratic transition and how this experience influenced its international strategies and the kind of aid that was sent to Chile. Sorry. Okay. So when the coup happened in September 1973, Spain was still under the Franco's dictatorship. Despite that, the impact was important. So there had been like an immediate wave of protest and support toward Chilean citizens under Pinochet dictatorship. Often through clandestine channels for obvious reasons. Also, like the spread of graffiti along the walls was a form of solidarity with the Chileans, letters to newspapers, donation to the Chilean resistance, and gatherings organized by Spanish trade unions. With the death of Franco in 1975, we see an increase and a more visible a form of international solidarity in Spain. There was the creation of the Spanish Committee of Solidarity with the Chilean People that was created in 1976. And if anyone wants to deeper this subject, Pedro Feria Vázquez wrote about those years. And what I consider important in this specific framework is the fact that the solidarity of this year was often underlining the deep connection between the Spanish citizens and the Chileans, in the sense that, for example, the manifestation organized in 1977 by the Spanish working days for the Chilean resistance, organized by the Unión General de Trabajadores, underlined the debt that the Spanish had with the Chileans for the support that they gave them during and after the Civil War. This was stressed again in 1978 when Madrid hosted the International World Conference in solidarity with Chile. And again, the official declaration of the conference stressed the enduring debt that democratic forces in Spain owed to Chilean people for their support during that period. And this is a characteristic that will remain along the years. Another important feature in this year, so we are here at the beginning of the Spanish transition to democracy, is the fact that the cultural history and production of Chile had also an influence in the transition. For example, it is quite known the fact that the group of the Inti Limami and the Nueva Canción Chilena, Violeta Parra, become part of the repertoire of the Spanish transition. So this showed this deep connection that went beyond the known ties due to the Spanish past imperialism or international diplomacy. It was something that was built on the shared experience of persecution and dictatorship. So in the meantime, while in Spain we had this involvement and connection between the two sides of the Atlantic, the Spanish Socialist Party had also a direct involvement in the Latin American territory and in Chile. This was done thanks also to the support of the Socialist International. So what happened was basically that the Spanish Socialists and the Social International had a common goal. The goal was to support the democratization of Latin American countries that were under a dictatorship. And the Spanish Socialists also counted on the support of the Social International to rebuild their ties in this historical period with Latin America. And the Socialists trusted the Socialist International trusted González and the party because of their direct experience with dictatorship in clandestinity and also with the transition itself. So in these same years, especially from 1976 to 1979, Felipe González had several trips in Latin America. Again, I like always to mention historians that have worked on specific subjects. Luciana Fazio worked on the relationship between the International Socialists and the PSOE. So González made several trips to Latin America in those years to support democratic initiatives. He also assisted, he is a defense lawyer, so he also supported political prisoners and advocated for the defense of lawyers that were also persecuted under the Pinochet regime. Here I always forget to move with the PowerPoint. I'll put it here. So here I have all the documents that you see. These belong to the Fundación Pablo Iglesias. I forgot to put a reference to it. Fundación Pablo Iglesias is in Alcalá de Henares. So here we have two documents. So one is the intervention of Felipe González to the called Trial de la FAC, which was a trial against the members of the Unidad Popular government under Allende. There had been like 60 accused in those periods by the Pinochet regime, and González was defending, not all the 60s, but among others, Erich Schnake, who was also part of the Allende government and the socialists that would later move to Spain. We will return also to his figure. So these are the notes of the trial for the defense of Schnake and others. And on the other side, you have pictures with a letter asking for support and the protection of political prisoners. Another key figure of these years, perhaps even more when we talk about international aid, is Elena Flores. She was in these years working with the Socialist International and will later become secretary of the PSOE International Relations Office. She traveled extensively to several Latin American countries in those years, in the 70s, in the 80s, and also later on. She had a really important role in advancing international effort for democracy and building bridges between Spain and Latin American countries. These missions of Maria Flores and also González, the general scope of them, besides what I already said, was also that of monitoring local elections and support opposition groups to the regime. So we are moving chronologically. We arrive now to the moment of the first Spanish fully democratic election. It had been won by Felipe González in 1982. This represents a turning point for international aid. From this moment on, during the first mandate of the party, the kind of support that the party and Spain was providing to Chilean citizens moved beyond party or associations-based network to become a proactive foreign policy led by institutions and NGO. To reach this development, the government applied a reform of the institution. For example, in 1982, only a couple of months after the election, they created the Subdirección of the Derechos Humanos that aimed to integrate human rights into foreign policy discussions and also to coordinate human rights, humanitarian issues. They also created in 1985 the Secretaría de Estado de Cooperación Internacional y para Iberoamérica. This institute in particular centralized what previously was more spread among various institutions, but more importantly, it marked the transformation of international aid that at this point, with this creation, moved to a core state policy that had also political, technical, and budgetary independence and significance. There was also the moving of the country from being a receiving country to a donor country in 1983. And finally, in 1986, Spain joined the European Community, which was a goal that was pursued since the Franco era. This allowed the government to push for European action against dictatorships in Latin America, to condemn authoritarian regimes, and also to establish funds to support democratic transitions. One line in this sense was the line called 992, which supported NGO in Chile. So overall, as the former director of the CCP said, by the end of the first term, Spain had an aid model who was comparable to other established donor nations. So this new political and institutional context helped to raise the rise of new NGO in Spain. And because of the general new context, but also for the active policy that, in this sense, that was pushed by the government. There was a major coordination within the state and the NGO, and an active involvement, support, more funds for this, and also this is more a general outcome of the Human Euromed project. What we also saw is that even though the increasing number of Spanish NGO arrives in a sense later than other European countries, the number it's significant if we look at other countries under dictatorship in Europe. So if we look at Portugal or Greece. So this again shows the proactive effort of both the state and also the involvement of civil society in this sense. What this meant for this research. The fact that among the race of the new NGO, we have also NGOs that are connected to political parties in this period, and the PSOE established its own NGO organization in 1986. This was called Solidaridad Internacional, and it was led by Elena Flores, which I mentioned before, and she also directed the Department of Foreign Relations of the Fundación Pablo Iglesias, which was already existing foundation. It was born in 1926. But what is important is that also in 1986, the Fundación Pablo Iglesias creates its own department for Latin America. So both these two organizations, since this year, they are created, both are as a response of Spanish entering in the European community, and so the necessity to rethink the country's relationship with Latin America and a more institutional approach to international aid, but also to actively support democratization. So this was the established goal for these two organizations. Support the democratization in Chile, which it was actually the main focus in those years, but also in other countries. I don't have much data about it, but we know that in the first 5 years of Solidaridad Internacional creation, out of 98 projects actively implemented in Latin America, 18 were only addressed to Chile, which is a significant number considering that there are many countries in Latin America, of course. And this only actually until 1990. Of course, I mentioned before that, of course, this international aid was strictly connected to Spanish own experience of transition. This, of course, was in the was shared also by key Chilean figures in these years, which helped the exportation of this kind of aid with a specific target and with specific, let's say, characteristics that we will see in a moment. Among these figures, I can mention Ricardo Lagos, who was a prominent member of the Chilean Socialist Party. He said he met González in 1983, and he, in a book published by Bitter and Lowenthal in 2015, the book collects a series of interviews, among which there is this to Ricardo Lagos, and so in the interview he said that the meeting with González really had a major impact in his idea about how transition to democracy. Another important figure that shared the Spanish approach and openly talked about following the example of the pacted rupture to go through a peaceful transition was Patricio Aylwin, who will be the first democratic, the first elected the president in Chile after the dictatorship, Christian Democrat. And also about this, Ricardo Lagos said that in those years he told to Patricio Aylwin, like, if you form a small coalition, you can be Suarez and I can be Felipe González, and we do the transition. And another figure that is a figure supporting the Spanish lesson of negotiated transition, he specifically said, was Eduardo Frei, who was another Christian Democrat president of Chile before Allende. So again, there was active discussion about how to push for the transition in Chile, and which kind of model to follow, how to do it, and again, connection with the Spanish socialists. But not only. In these years, the concept of transition also had an influence in policy and in the academic world. It's worth to mention the publication of the 4 volumes book, Transition from Humanitarian Rule, edited by O'Donnell, Schmitter, and Whitehead. So these volumes, they provide a framework for the understanding of democratic transition in Latin America and in Europe. They also analyze the role of different actors, and they mention the elite agency model, which argue that democratic transition could be negotiated through pacts and strategic interaction among political elites. This is not the only example provided. They talk also about the transition in Portugal and Greece. But in general, my point here is that their volumes also, especially when they talk about the actors that are important for leading peaceful transition, they mention, for example, the importance of fostering new forms of political participation, and they state the important role of human rights organizations and the importance of reactivate trade unions and related working class organizations. And so these elements are actually the key actors that we also find during in the projects for aid for democracy supported by the Spanish socialists. So here I have a general overview of the projects. It's not the most trendy map. I'm working on it, but it gives an idea. So the main ones, as I said, so they dealt with the reactivation of trade union and workers' organization in different areas of the country. They supported the neighborhood association. They also invested in a project called Alcaldes por la Democracia, Mayors for Democracy, which was about democracy awareness, the right to vote, and training of local leaders, and also support to rural cooperatives. Another important line addressed by the Spanish socialists was helping out the Instituto de la Mujer, which was a Chilean organization established in 1987. The Instituto de la Mujer provided psychological and medical care and legal also advice to women in those years, and the Fundación Pablo Iglesias and Solidaridad Internacional helped with the construction of new buildings in some areas. They also provided furnitures. Among also the training that I mentioned, I can stress the fact that these were all initiatives that were of course held in Chile with Chilean organizations and NGOs, but a few of them, for example, the line about the reactivation of trade unions, some of these courses were held also in Spain in those years. So I will go now more specifically on talking about each of these projects, but before that, I'd like to, it's important to return to the Chilean historical context of this period. So what was happening these years is it was that the country and the opposition was preparing for the upcoming plebiscite of 1988. The referendum was established with the Constitution of 1980s. It was a controlled attempt to confirm Pinochet presidency. although the question of the referendum was about a possible remaining of the dictator for other 8 years under a civilian rule, so like transitioning the dictator transitioning the country to democracy. If the no, so no, we don't want other 8 years with Pinochet. If the no would have won, then the country would have gone to new elections. So I inserted here 2 pictures that you can see. So an inside information that I found interesting when I read about the first time is that the campaign pro-Pinochet advertisement was Democracia sí. So voting sí, yes, was like, yes, he will remain other 8 years. And what they were advertising was that the country could reach democracy either ways. So with him or with new elections. So the advertisement were Democracia yes, to vote for him. And yeah, and of course there was much less or non-existent advertisement for the no vote. So around this, the Chilean and also the international community, like many countries, mobilized to support the no vote standing. What was crucial for the no supporters was the fact that so 1 year before the referendum, there were 2 million people registered for the vote. And what was known was that the goal to have a possibility for the no to win was to reach at least, I think, 7 million or 8 million, so I have it in 7 million people registered. So the international community, the local community, local parties, also the Catholic Chilean Church, they created various committees and organizations to support and spread awareness about the no vote. In Spain, the PSOE and other democratic parties, and also the UGT and the Comisiones Obreras, they created the Spanish Committee for Free Elections in Chile, advocating like free election again for a peaceful transition. One of the projects that was directly addressed to support the voter registration was the I mentioned before, Alcaldes por la Democracia, so Mayors for Democracy. It was, the project was launched in 1987 by an umbrella, or supported by an umbrella of Chilean NGO, and also from the Fundación Pebre Iglesias and Solidaridad Internacional, and also the Instituto Chileno por la Democracia Municipal. The aim, again, was to encourage voter participation, spread awareness about democratic values and electoral rights. A Chilean leading figure behind this initiative was Carmen Frey. She was a former mayor of Santiago and one of the leading figures of the Comisión Chilena de Exalcaldes y Regidores, so former mayors. And the similar organization was promoted in Europe by the PSOE, and was a section of the Council for European Municipalities. Different countries were part of this association, but Spain was definitely the larger group inside it. So as Carmen Frey stated, the battle for the no vote in Chile was also the battle for full democracy in the municipalities. These were intended as strongly connected, because under the Chilean dictatorship, municipalities had become key instrument of social control, with mayors serving as political agents for the regime to weaken parties, and also there was a spread promotion of a political citizenship at this level. And again, I'd like to mention a book written by Valdivia about this subject, about municipalities in Chile. So what we also see with the launch of this project is that the aid takes a municipal and local dimension at this point. The scale of reference is that of the council, or even smaller is the neighborhood. And inside these communities, they aim to foster debate and participation, create the community, and this is actually what happened. There was an increase of local involvement, and people were starting to advocate for their fundamental rights, basic needs, on several matters. Another point of support for the Chilean transition was about the participation as observers of many Spanish during the referendum, because of course the fear was that the referendum would have not been led in a democratic and transparent way. So over 400 foreign observers arrived from 24 countries. So the international, not only Spanish solidarity for Chile was always significant. However, of these 400, 50 plus were only from Spain. Among those, there was Maria Flores, so from Solidaridad Internacional and the PSOE, and Maria José Benegas, who was the leading figure of the Fundación Pablo Iglesias in those years. He was the son of Venezuelan exiled from the Spanish Civil War, and he also had experience with the Chilean opposition. So this is the first I consider to be the project in which they invested bigger effort, at least at the beginning, but not exclusively. Another line of action again that had a local dimension was the support to asociaciones vecinales, so neighborhood association. So these kind of projects, they combined both Spanish and Chilean tradition of associationism with democratic and self-governance. Neighborhood associations were a reality already under the Franco era. Several historians have worked on the research of this subject, Cabrero Blanco, for example, Palmera Radcliffe, Tamar Groves. And as we know, these groups in Spain provided local service, they pushed for infrastructure creation, and they were also a base for anti-Franco mobilization, political engagement, very, very rich. And also in his groups, there was a prominent role played by women in providing essential services like childcare. The same importance of neighborhood association was present in Chile during the Eduardo Frei period, Eduardo Frei that I mentioned before, and Salvador Allende government. They both pushed and stressed the importance of local participation in economic, cultural, and political life. Purcell and Bastian Saavedra, they worked on this topic for Chile. So what was the aim of why they were pushing for helping out this association was to addressing basic needs and also community empowerment at local level, and civic engagement and exchange between people. The programs dealt with providing economic literacy to the neighborhood association, and also supported the creation of ollas comunes, the soup kitchens, providing funds to buy, to purchase food, and also techniques on what to buy, how to buy, and how to sustain child nutrition. They also created and supported a newsletter that was called The Diet, organized with Chico, who was another local organization, and as the name says, it was about providing information on nutrition to these local groups. Another connected to this, there was also the reactivation of trade union organizations in those years. So in 1987, Elena Flores met with the Christian Democrat Manuel Bustos, who was a key opponent of the regime and advocate for the internalization of the Chilean fight against the regime. He was exiled in Europe in those years, and together they designed these courses that would be led by trade unionists and political leaders, and these were organized in two parts with special emphasis on the Spanish model of transition. So these two parts were so one was mainly on trade union education, so organizational techniques, how to bargain with enterprises and the state, and they also provided economic informations to future trade unionists. And another part was technical in the sense that it aimed to teach how to create new trade unions from scratch. And also worker cooperatives. So what is significant also about this is that before 1986, so before the creation of Solidaridad Internacional, Fundación Pablo Iglesias, and also the rise of Spanish NGO, the opposition in Chile was sustained mainly by and organized by international funding, sent directly to the Chilean opposition, and also so to help maintain alive and strong the resistance in Chile, despite the repression. While after 86, what we see is that these funds and support was increasingly channeled through NGOs and institution, with higher collaboration also with the local or similar organizations, and so yes, these groups were pooled funding, expertise, in the sense that when, for example, for the trade union reactivation, Spanish trade unionists were sent to Chile for the trainings. And in general, I mean, there was a wide range of initiatives. Maybe we can talk about it later. Then these initiatives were kept alive also after the victory of the no vote. We know that Ricardo, that Lagos, that after the no vote, he became Minister of Education, and he again was in contact with Elena Flores, and they renewed the aim to keep these initiatives alive in those years, because it was stressed that, of course, even though Chile had started its transition, the trade union still needed major support in those years to guarantee not only the start of the transition, but its prosecution and consolidation. What was also provided as in these courses was the input to maintain a connection between the local organization, because again we are talking about a local level, so between the local organization and related trade union bigger and institutions, so the national institution or the regional institution, in the way that this would not become like isolated pocket of resistance, but organized and structured unions with legitimacy and the guidance. In this framework, the 8 projects, they define these courses as regional development programs and a way to deepen social human rights. This is how they were framed. And another connected to the trade union initiatives was the workers' cooperative support, again with the collaboration of local NGOs and institutions and Spanish Solidaridad Internacional and the Fundación Pablo Iglesias. As for the neighborhood association, cooperatives were in Chile a strong reality before the dictatorship. They had been supported by Frei and also by Allende, and they, with the regime, they became immediately the target of repression. So only few of them remained alive in the late 80s, and those that were still alive became the target of international aid from several countries and Spain. They were considered of crucial importance because they were, and this is how they are described in the sources of Solidaridad Internacional and the Fundación Pablo Iglesias, they were considered as democratic and social organizations with a crucial role in opposing the military junta in those periods. Also, they were important because they could foster economic development and growth, but with a democratic and collaborative profile. So the training in this sense provided by Spain were in marketing and management, how to create from zero new cooperatives, how to boost the productivity of the cooperatives, and also how to become a self-managed unit, and how to adapt to the change that would have come. There were also support for the creation of women-led cooperatives, for example, creating tailoring or organizations. Another prominent line was the support of the creation of rural cooperatives. We have there another extract of a document from the Fundación Pablo Iglesias. Here, for example, we see so the project aimed to training and to provide training to 3 groups of 20 peasants. Usually with 20 peasants, they mean 20 peasant families, in the way that in 1 year time they could create their own cooperative. What all these projects have in common, so the Mayor for Democracy, the neighborhood associations, and the worker cooperatives, is that they had the know-how embedded in their aim. So, which represented not only a tool for relief, but also a means of building solid and lasting structure that could reduce the risk of failed transition or return to authoritarianism. Then the last of the initiative, and both in chronological sense, that as it was actually the last, because then the attention of the party and related association moved to other countries, was the project called the Retornados, so the returnee. The project was implemented after the victory of the no vote. And it aimed to assist the Chilean exiles in returning to their homeland. Again, it was sustained by Solidaridad Internacional and the Fundación Pablo Iglesias, and it provided furnished houses to the returnees, community centers, tools to find new job and collocation in the labor market, trainings. It was quite wide range, and it was built on a model that was previously implemented also in Argentina. So this closes the period of international aid for democracy in Chile. In 1989, the country held democratic election. And Patricio Aylwin started his mandate the year after, 1990. At this point, the relationship between Spain and Chile moved to a state-to-state kind of cooperation. And a symbol of this new relationship was the sign of the Treaty of Friendship of Cooperation, who aimed to economic cooperation between the two countries, but also, again, supported this time via state, supported the transition to democracy in the country. Then, in 1991, Aylwin embarked in its first travel to Europe since the democracy in Chile. The travel started with Madrid, where he also met the Queen and King of Spain. And in that same period, he awarded Elena Flores of the Grand Cruz Order of Bernardo Higgins, who is the most prestigious award granted to a non-Chilean citizens for distinguished contribution to the country. So I'm coming to my conclusions. I think there are 3 points of importance here. So the first is the fact that the PSOE and its related organization clearly leverage on their own transitional experience to support and shape aid projects to Chile. The project had a particular feature that was connected to the rebuilding of the grassroots fabric of the country. As a means to guarantee the actual realization of the transition and consolidation. So this is actually a larger discussion that we can have in the questions or later. But what I think is important to stress is that, so we know that the Spanish transition is being recognized as an example of transition, perhaps the example of democratic transformation. It was shaped by several elements, like the elite negotiation, the consensus building, and also the active involvement of civil society. While the first two, I believe, received more historical attention in the last years, the recent scholarship stressed the importance of the last point in the transition, so the involvement of the civil society. I think that international aid also has all these components. Besides, they were aiming to rebuild the grassroots of organizations. As for the Spanish transition, these components, these elements, are not completely distinguished or completely separated. There is a compenetration among these all elements. So what we have also seen, like so far, is that the project aimed to rebuild the democratic culture from the bottom up. So they, yes, recognize the grassroots actors' importance in the democratic process, but on the others, they also show how elite-driven these initiatives were and how they were linked to bottom-up dynamics. What I mean with this? I mean that it was a connection between and the discussions between Spanish leaders and also Chilean leaders agreeing in supporting this kind of model, and that was then reflected also in the kind of aid they proactively supported. So these organizations, as in Spain, they were not meant to become politically independent. They were always connected to institutionalized authority. So we saw that one part of the training or one part of the courses, and that we're also on connecting this local dimension to the reference at a higher level. Again, this was done to guarantee a legitimacy in the long run, but also a guidance along the process. And as it has been stressed by Pamela Radcliffe and also Sanchez León in the Spanish case, something similar happened in Spain with the neighborhood association that were supported, of course, during the transition, but even though they asked to be recognized later on, this was not done. So another important element of the international aid for democracy is the horizontal dimension of the aid with Chilean partners. This is a characteristic that also my colleagues in the projects are seeing with Southern European international aid, in the sense that this is, so usually in other cases you may have hierarchical dimension of aid from the donor to the receiver. In this case, you have not, like, the aid and funds sent from Spain was connected to local initiatives, to local NGOs, to Chilean plans. There were discussions with partner parties and partner institutions. And there were also often references to the shared experience of persecution and the mutual understanding and interest in reaching the transition to democracy. Finally, the last element we're to discuss is relative to the political aspect of this international aid. So without delving into theoretical discussion, from a very practical point of view, activists moved from the party to institutions to NGOs. Elena Flores, for example, who I believe was the main figure behind international aid, the one that shaped this kind of aid, she was in all these groups. So clearly there was a blurring of the traditional divisions between this group, and therefore Spain created in those years, at least with these organizations, an hybrid model of international aid in which state bodies, political parties, civil society organizations collaborate all together and interact for a common goal. That was that of supporting democracy in other countries. And this was my last part. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Grazia, for this super interesting presentation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Grazia, for this interesting presentation. It's actually quite amazing. I really enjoy it. So now we are going to devote like 15 minutes more or less for questions, answers, debate. So I open the floor if there is any question here in the room or through YouTube. It is a moment now. ¿Hay algo entrando en YouTube? No. Okay, well, the questions we can do them in both in Spanish or in English. I will have a few, but Julia also has a question. So, Julia.
So many thanks, Grazia, for this inspiring talk. So I have two questions that are also curiosities. So first of all, if you can give us more data on Elena Flores. It seems to me that she was really important in Solidaridad Internacional, according to your talk, to your paper. So if you can explain in us the past and biography of these women during the 80s, above all during the end of the 70s, there weren't many women in the Socialist Party. So there were for sure women, but they were not in many important parts of the party. So if you can explain us why Elena Flores had this important role in the foreign affairs part of the parties. And then the other part that it seems to me really interesting is this connection that you did at the end of your talk between elites model and the Asociación Vecinales and the neighborhood movement, and this connection with the Socialist Party. And I think it's totally new and really interesting how the Socialist Party trying to help with this neighborhood association. So my question now is the relation with the Communist Party. So if you think that there is a different model, indeed in our paper with Alan there was also this point, if there is an opposition between socialists and communists, or if they are competing with the same ground, if there is a socialist model of humanitarianism or a communist one, and how they struggle with the communists that were, in the case of Spain, the neighborhood movement was really led by communists. And these are the two questions.
¿Cómo quieres tú? Sí. So, muchas gracias, Julia, por todas las preguntas. De hecho, algunas me la apunto para futuras investigaciones. Bueno, tengo ideas. La primera, Elena Flores, sí, es una figura súper interesante en este periodo. No tengo una respuesta completa a tu pregunta. Estoy en contacto con ella para una entrevista. que espero hacer pronto. Hemos hablado un poco, le he pedido, bueno, esto como era ser mujer en estos periodos, había muy pocas mujeres, además de ser una de las pocas en el Partido Socialista. Ella hizo estas missions en Latinoamérica en estos años, en los 70, entonces una mujer joven viajando por la Socialist International en Latinoamérica. Es una de las preguntas que quiero hacerle, ¿cómo era esto? Por su biografía, hasta ahora sé que ella fue profesora en Madrid, ya en el 74, formó con otros grupos creo, académicos, una organización que se llamaba Alianza Democrática. Así que estaba activa políticamente y luego entró a formar parte del partido, llamada por su experiencia en relaciones internacionales, porque ella de hecho tenía una formación en este sentido. Y, bueno, pero sí, es muy significativa y también recibió otro award, otro premio desde Perú por su papel, similar como en Chile. Quiero investigar más sobre esto, sí. Luego, la relación entre elite, model, asociaciones vecinales, el partido. Lo que yo he visto es que las fundaciones y Solidaridad Internacional, que de nuevo tenían figuras que de hecho eran parte también del partido, así que hablamos de todo el grupo, estaban muy enganchadas en ayudar la reconstrucción del tejido social y de las asociaciones vecinales. Solidaridad Internacional en particular envió también activistas a Chile para averiguar la situación de las asociaciones, qué tipo de ayuda podían necesitar, pidiendo directamente el tipo de ayuda que necesitaban y cómo poderla ayudar. Así que definitivamente era uno de los temas que estaban interesados. ¿Cómo se conecta esto con el hecho que durante la transición era el Partido Comunista que estaba más cerca de estos grupos? No lo sé. Muy bien, lo que creo, esta es una pregunta realmente interesante, lo que creo es que en los 80 el partido tuvo tiempo de pensar en la transición. Y pensar también en todo lo que contribuyó en el suceso de la transición. El partido, sus figuras principales son también las figuras que estaban más involucradas con el activismo internacional. Y creo que esto, bueno, claramente desde como vemos que la iniciativa estaba soportada y esto tomó más importancia. También González habló sobre la importancia no específicamente de asociaciones vecinales, pero sí del papel de los estudiantes, de otros grupos de la sociedad civil durante la transición. Habló de estos al finales de los 80. Así que no tengo una respuesta concreta, pero creo que está en algún lado entre esto, entre una nueva lectura o new awareness sobre cómo fue la transición. Y creo que por lo que puede contestar.
Muchas gracias, Grazia. Carlos también tiene una pregunta, luego yo tendría también un par. Sí. Y todavía tenemos una más. Vale.
Muchas gracias. Ha sido interesantísimo y mucha información nueva, yo creo que desconocida hasta ahora. Dos preguntas tengo, de hecho. Una, me ha llamado la atención que hay ya actividad y programas antes del fin de la dictadura y antes del referéndum. Quería saber en qué margen de tolerancia actuaba el Partido Socialista y otros, bueno, la Internacional Socialista y ONGs en el Chile de la dictadura todavía. ¿Y cuál era el margen de acción que había? Y la segunda has hablado de la colaboración de la Internacional Socialista y quería preguntar específicamente si la Fundación Ebert, la Friedrich Ebert, tan potente y que tanto había ayudado al PSOE español a construirse, tenía también un papel importante y habían ido de la mano, porque creo que es una transposición de experiencias de Alemania a España y llevarlo a Chile. Gracias.
Gracias. Estoy colectando preguntas para mi research questions para mis próximos trabajos. Si el margen de tolerancia, no he encontrado mucho sobre eso. Esa también era una de mis preguntas. Estaba buscando en las fuentes si mencionaban algo sobre eso. Sabemos por trabajos, no hay muchísimo, pero sabemos por trabajos de algunos historiadores que organizaciones no gubernamentales no estaban toleradas. Había muy pocas. Una era la Vicaría de la Solidaridad, que era la organización conectada con la Iglesia Católica chilena, pero además tuvieron curas perseguidos en estos años. Así que yo creo, puede ser que con el aproxarse del referéndum, como que la atención internacional estaba muy concentrada sobre Chile en estos años. Y esto también era uno de los motivos por qué, de hecho, pudieron llegar tantos observadores, que no era algo que Pinochet quería hacer. Pero creo que esta atención internacional fue algo que garantizó mayor presencia de organizaciones extranjeras y tolerancia de organizaciones locales. No eran solo NGO, también había institutos de investigaciones en estos años, académicos que estaban más involucrados. Sí, y por la Herbert, la he visto mencionada en las fuentes. Está ahí, ahora no me recuerdo si estaba también en estos proyectos, porque estos proyectos había, de hecho, muchísimas organizaciones que estaban no en todos, pero algunas veces podía ser que no había bastantes contributos económicos desde un grupo, porque, bueno, hablamos de años also difíciles, entonces se buscaban entre grupos amigos para ayuda. Sí, esto.
Muy bien, gracias Carlos y Grazia. ¿Tenemos todavía otra pregunta? Sí.
Gracias. Muchas gracias por la presentación, muy interesante. Yo tenía dos preguntas, están un poco relacionadas entre ellas. La primera era, he visto que en estos años el gobierno del PSOE un poco jugaba con esa dualidad entre el gobierno y el partido, ¿no? Y que muchas de las cosas que hacían, recuerdo alguna anécdota de guerra yendo a alguna manifestación contra Pinochet, ¿no? Y le reclamaban que como el vicepresidente del gobierno se manifestaba así, él decía que lo hacía en su carácter de militante o de líder del partido, ¿no? Entonces un poco mi pregunta iba en ese sentido, de hasta qué punto o cómo convivía esa ayuda que daba el PSOE a través de las fundaciones, o estas fundaciones en sí mismas, con la ayuda que empezaba a dar el gobierno español, ¿no? Un poco como si colaboraban hasta algún punto o la ayuda del gobierno español era para otros fines completamente distintos y sí era un poco más enfocada en la democratización. Entonces, ¿cómo esa dualidad también se percibía o no en la ayuda internacional? Y la segunda es, si es que hubo, ¿qué lecciones iba aprendiendo esta cooperación española, ya sea del gobierno o de los partidos, de las otras transiciones a la democracia en América Latina, ¿no? Porque para ese entonces, para el fin de la dictadura de Pinochet, pues ya había transitado Argentina, ya había transitado Guatemala, Uruguay. Entonces, un poco si también de eso fue aprendiendo esta cooperación española. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. También muy interesante. Entonces, sobre la dualidad de fundaciones y gobierno. Bueno, en cualquier mesura había una distinción entre la actividad de solidaridad internacional de la NGO, que oficialmente no estaba conectada. Tenían mismas personas trabajando, pero no había un link oficial. La fundación sí, claro, pero la solidaridad no. Y creo que Luciana Fazio menciona en su paper el hecho que Elena Flores y también en breves escambios por email que tuvimos juntas, mencionó el hecho que en el sentido que lo que el gobierno no podía hacer por razones de ética y diplomática, llegaba el partido o la asociación. Claro, no siempre creo que hay esta distinción por completo, porque cuando vamos a ver en práctica no siempre fuera así. Tendría que pensarlo mejor, pero estos son los elementos que tengo en este momento. Y también en finales de los 80 hay un par de artículos del País con polémica con el PSOE por el hecho que algunos de... La polémica, no me recuerdo el autor ahora, pero la polémica era sobre el hecho que los fondos económicos para el autor del artículo llegaban demasiado a ciertas asociaciones y no a otras. Estoy hablando de un artículo del País, no sé si era así o no, pero claro que había tensión en el País, porque como he dicho antes, esta tensión por la NGO era algo muy nuevo. Entonces creo que también era un periodo donde se necesitaba entender qué son, qué importancia tiene, si son políticas o no, si sostener la democracia en Chile era algo que era político o no. Entonces, sí hay esta polémica. En específico, un artículo polemizaba con el hecho que Solidaridad Internacional o la fundación, uno de los dos, estaban ayudando por la creación de cooperativas. Esto era algo que no estaban de acuerdo. Sobre las lecciones de cooperación de otras transiciones, no tengo referencias sobre esto en mis fuentes. Pero sí tuvo una influencia fue la experiencia de González y de las Flores en Latinoamérica y en Chile en estos años. Porque yo creo que cuando que todas las reformas institucionales del primer mandato de González que tenían estas características tan importantes de atención a los derechos humanos, a las NGO, a la democratización de Chile y todos los contactos que estos grupos tenían con organizaciones locales, eran muchísimos. Como he dicho, todos estos proyectos estaban en colaboración con lo que ya había en el país, no eran independientes. Entonces, yo creo que hay una influencia en el desarrollo institucional de las políticas exteriores españolas, en las políticas humanitarias de España, eso sí. Y además la presencia de todos los exiliados en el país. Erich Schnake, que he mencionado antes, él, por ejemplo, estaba en España durante, no me recuerdo bien, finales de los 70 creo que llegó, antes estaba en Francia, y él, en su biografía, él describe cómo durante las primeras elecciones municipales de España lo llamaron para pedir consejo, considerado su experiencia como socialista chileno, porque era una figura muy importante, y también era consejero del Instituto de Cooperación Iberoamericano en estos periodos. Otros exiliados del Cono del Sur tuvieron papeles políticos. Hay una influencia desde España hacia Chile, pero también al revés. Yeah.
Vale, muy bien. Bueno, aprovechando mi posición aquí, hago la última pregunta. Por si luego hay alguna más, todavía se puede meter una más. Y bueno, simplemente decirte que este es un tema interesantísimo y muy relevante, excepcional, yo creo, para diferentes tipos de historiografía, que encaja muy bien. Y tocas muchos temas que son muy relevantes, tanto para los 70 como para los años 80, pero además también cubres todo este periodo, ¿no?, de transformaciones que ocurren justo en estas décadas que, como sabemos, son bastante importantes. Y me quería parar en una de tus conclusiones, que es que esto no fue solo una intervención política, ¿no?, sino que la política empezó a estar también modelada por preocupaciones humanitarias, ¿no?, cada vez más, lo cual es, en mi opinión, estás dando aquí un ejemplo muy valioso, un ejemplo concreto sobre este momento de transformación en la idea de democracia que ocurre de manera internacional en Occidente y que ocurre justo en este periodo, ¿no?, como ha identificado Martin Conway, que pasa de una manera de entender la democracia de posguerra, democracia representativa, a otra que se entiende más en términos de derechos humanos, libertad individual, etc. Dicho esto, que como te digo, simplemente para decir la relevancia que yo creo que tiene tu caso, tenía un par de preguntas. Una bueno, para todo este periodo y otra solo para los 80. Y quería preguntarte lo primero cuál es el correlato o el relato que acompaña a todo este apoyo. ¿Se moviliza en algún momento en este periodo la memoria de la experiencia democrática previa chilena, es decir, del Gobierno de Unidad Popular, o se hace referencia, la nueva referencia es la transición democrática española y la democracia española? Esa sería una. Y la segunda, y esta sería ya para los años 80, la segunda mitad de los 80, cuando el PSOE ya está en el poder, y solamente si lo sabes, ¿no?, o cuál es tu opinión, ¿juega algún papel estas intervenciones internacionales por parte de los socialistas para mantener unido o para limar asperezas entre el PSOE, el Gobierno y la UGT en España, a través de estos proyectos comunes? Y eso sería todo.
Gracias, Alan. Sí, se conecta con muchos campos de investigación. De hecho, trabajando en esto, estuve leyendo de verdad un poco de todos. No sabía bien lo que me faltaba, lo que necesitaba saber, y aún siento esto no me sale en español, esto feeling de, pero debería también ver más esto, me podría indicar cosas que no he visto. Sí, es así. Por ejemplo, una cosa que no conozco muy bien, podría ser algo que algunos nuevos campos de investigación me pueden ayudar, es esto sobre si no solo la transición española, pero si la experiencia democrática chilena, que claro tenía una experiencia importante en este sentido, si esto también tuvo un papel, no lo sé. En los primeros años, así en los 70, se habla de esto, del ejemplo claramente del gobierno de Allende, como punto importante, y también, como contestaba antes, el hecho que los socialistas del gobierno de Unidad Popular que estaban en España fueron recibidos por el gobierno y fueron involucrados en papeles políticos. Así que por la experiencia que tenían, por la cultura política que tenían. Pero no sabría profundizar más si esto llegaba más allá de la experiencia de la conexión y la importancia del periodo de Allende para los socialistas, el periodo de Frei. Por ejemplo, Solidaridad Internacional y la Fundación Pablo Iglesias sí mencionan el periodo de Frei y la historia y la relevancia del sistema cooperativo y de asociaciones vecinales bajo Frei. No sé si esto puede ser algo que nos dice, que representa una pregunta. Ellos sí evaluaban este periodo como importante por la democracia desde abajo, pero no puedo profundizar más de eso. Y mantener unidos el PSOE y el sindicato. También, no tengo una respuesta completa. Bueno, en Solidaridad Internacional o en la Fundación sí que había colaboraciones en este sentido. El UGT creó también su propia NGO, creo en el 89 o 87, no estoy demasiado segura, pero también desde lo que sé hasta ahora no parecían tan divididas. La NGO y el sindicato, es cuando trabajaban con las organizaciones del PSOE, en las fuentes no hay muchas diferencias. Bueno, es como tuvimos encuentros con los líderes, esto y esto. Trabajaban por fines de ayuda internacional, eso sí.
Muchas gracias.
A ti.
Pues muchísimas gracias. No sé si hay una última pregunta, la metemos. Si no hay más preguntas, pues ahora tomamos una pausa, tomamos un café y volvemos dentro de 20 minutos para la segunda parte de la conferencia. ¿Vale? Así que muchas gracias, y aquí sí que terminamos la emisión en YouTube. Vale.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, está genial. Es súper interesante, un tema interesantísimo.
Gracias, estaba muy